As macaques leapt from branch to branch and the forest wigtails sang from the canopy, an elephant hunt took place in the dense rainforest below. Ahead in the distance, the king hunter spotted it, large, gray, with a cracked surface like the skin of his prey. But this was no elephant. Entangled by the thick vines of the brush, a stone wall appeared, then another and another. The king, Ang Chan, had not found his quarry, but instead the long lost temple of his ancestors. Hello, and welcome to Impactful Moments, where we explore some of the most, you guessed it, impactful moments in human history. In this video, we'll explore the Khmer Empire and the building of Angkor, one of the most awe-inspiring cities in human history. While often seen by many of its followers as Sanatana Dharma, a timeless way of life without a single point of origin, most historians trace Vedic Brahmanism's roots back about 4,500 years to the Vedic period in India. Centered on the Vedas, sacred hymns, and philosophical writings, this early tradition gradually evolved into what we now call Hinduism. From this same foundation, Buddhism and Jainism emerged, each shaping the subcontinent's religious landscape in different ways. These traditions spread outward from India over the centuries. Trade networks and influential rulers carried ideas and rituals far beyond their Indian birthplace. One of the first Southeast Asian states to absorb Indian religious and cultural influence was the Funan Kingdom, flourishing along the Mekong River from the 1st to 6th centuries CE. Funan was eventually overtaken, either absorbed or conquered, by the rising kingdom of Chenla. Dominant in what is now much of Laos, Cambodia, and southern Vietnam, Chenla continued to champion Hindu traditions. Yet it too would fracture into the water and land Chenla by the early 8th century, ushering in regional instability and decentralization, even falling under foreign rule. By the 8th century, Jayavarman II emerged. Details of his early life are hazy, but inscriptions suggest that around 781 CE, after spending time in Java, likely the modern-day Java in Indonesia, he returned to Southeast Asia and began consolidating power among the fragmented Chenla polities. For 2 decades, he maneuvered politically, fought battles, and forged alliances to unite scattered groups under his leadership. In 802 CE, on the sacred mountain of Phnom Kulen, Jayavarman held a ritual led by a Brahmin priest. He was declared both Chakravartin, a universal ruler, and Devaraja, a divine king, marking Cambodia's symbolic break from foreign dominance and the birth of the Khmer state. Jayavarman dedicated temples across shifting landscapes before finally settling in Hariharalaya. His successors built on his legacy, and with each generation, temples grew larger and more ambitious. In the early 10th century, Yasovarman moved the increasingly crowded capital northward to Yasodharapura, deep in the Khmer forests. Over time, this city, now known as Angkor, or simply the city, became the empire's heart, home to an array of temples and sophisticated hydraulic systems that captured monsoon rains in massive reservoirs, many crowned with temples at their center. Despite near constant warfare against neighbors like the Champa, and even a temporary relocation of the capital, Angkor thrived. By the early 12th century, Suryavarman II, remembered by some as one of the Khmer Empire's greatest rulers and by others as its greatest self-promoter, had seized the throne from his great uncle. While his military record is debated, with some sources noting significant defeats against the Dai Viet, his reputation as a builder is unquestioned. Over nearly 4 decades, Suryavarman II poured immense resources into construction projects, the most ambitious of which was a temple complex dedicated to Vishnu and likely intended as his mausoleum. The complex rose from a site nearly 2 square kilometers in size, surrounded by a moat and enclosure wall spanning over 5 square kilometers. Its galleries and corridors were lined with exquisitely detailed carvings, depicting religious mythology and glorified episodes from Suryavarman's reign. At its heart stood 5 soaring lotus towers, representing Mount Meru, the cosmic home of the gods and the axis of the universe in Hindu belief. To those who first saw it, the temple seemed too vast and intricate to have been built by human hands. Later generations said it must have been built by the gods themselves. This masterpiece, Angkor Wat, or simply City Temple, still remains as the largest religious monument on Earth, nearly 9 centuries after its completion around 1150, and stands as the ultimate expression of the Khmer Golden Age. Yet, while Angkor Wat represented the pinnacle of Khmer architecture, the city's story was far from over. After Suryavarman's reign, unrest simmered. When his successor, Dharanindravaraman II, died in 1160, the throne was meant to pass to his son Jayavarman VII. However, as a devout Mahayana Buddhist, he initially stepped aside, allowing his brother, Yashovarman II, to rule rather than plunge the kingdom into conflict. Yashovarman, however, proved weak, and in 1177 a usurper took power while the Cham peoples sacked Angkor. Jayavarman saw that his country was suffering, and despite his aforementioned pledge, raised an army. By 1181, at the age of 60, he had seized the throne, ushering in the height of Khmer power under his remarkable leadership. Under Jayavarman VII's rule, Khmer civilization reached both its greatest heights and, arguably, the limits of its endurance. He shifted the royal capital next door to Angkor Thom, a massive walled city whose very name means great city, more defensible than the earlier centers. Across this new capital and beyond, he launched an ambitious building campaign, raising 5 major temples during his reign. The most famous were the Bayan, its roughly 50 towers carved with enigmatic faces, often thought to be his own, and Taprom, a sprawling monastic complex dedicated to his mother. Jayavarman's vision was not limited to monuments. He extended the city's boundaries and oversaw a network of public works unprecedented in Southeast Asia. Inscriptions record the construction of 102 hospitals, part of his broader commitment to welfare. He also redirected the empire's religious identity, shifting from Hindu traditions to his own devotion to Mahayana Buddhism. Even Angkor Wat, originally consecrated to Vishnu, was altered when Jayavarman replaced its central Vishnu image with a statue of the Buddha. With its advanced engineering and vast waterworks sustaining rice cultivation, Angkor's population swelled, perhaps reaching 700,000 to a million, a scale that dwarfed European cities and rivaled even those in Song China. Its sheer size and integration of rural and urban landscapes even lead most historians to christen it the largest pre-industrial city in world history. Yet, its brilliance carried a cost. The immense resources required for construction, upkeep, and welfare may have strained the empire's finances, and when Jayavarman's Hindu successors reclaimed the throne, they defaced and rededicated many of Jayavarman's Buddhist temples. Historians often see this religious reversal as the symbolic end of Angkor's golden age, the point when its spiritual and cultural momentum began to wane. Enjoying so far? Give us a like and subscribe. It helps more than you know and keeps this kind of content coming. After the death of Jayavarman VII in 1218, the Khmer Empire was left with a fragile foundation. While its vast projects had elevated Angkor to its brilliant peak, they had also drained the treasury and unsettled the old Hindu elite, leaving the state vulnerable to both internal and external pressures. Internally, a significant and generational shift from Hinduism to Mahayana and eventually Theravada Buddhism transformed society. The latter, introduced from the island of Sinhala, modern-day Sri Lanka, took deep root among the population. This new faith emphasized simpler practices over the grand temple rituals, and its less flexible interpretation of classical Buddhism undermined the Devaraja cult that had long tied the king's authority to the divine, weakening the traditional elite. The primary external threat was the rising Siamese kingdom of Ayutthaya, centered near modern-day Bangkok, which grew into a formidable rival. Their frequent raids steadily eroded Angkor's strength and influence, making it even harder for the empire to project the dominance it once had. These human pressures were compounded by environmental and economic strain. A series of severe droughts, followed by unusually intense monsoons in the 14th century, damaged the empire's vital hydraulic system, significantly disrupting agriculture. At the same time, economic trends and shifting trade routes favored coastal ports along the Mekong over Angkor's inland location on the Tonle Sap, causing the population to migrate south toward new centers like Phnom Penh. While we aren't completely certain of all the factors that played in, by the time Ayutthaya finally captured Angkor in 1431, its fall likely wasn't a sudden event, but the culmination of centuries of war, religious change, economic strain, and environmental upheaval that had left the once great city hollowed out. Over the following centuries, the jungle would reclaim the city. Wooden homes and offices would disappear, and stone temples would be overcome by the dense forest. At its height, the Angkorian state was a regional powerhouse, possibly home to the largest city in the pre-industrial world. Its monumental architecture, sophisticated hydraulic systems, and urban planning shaped not only the daily lives of its inhabitants, but also Cambodia's culture for centuries. The religious and cultural shifts of Angkor persist today, with Theravada Buddhism now representing the state religion and followed by over 90% of the population. The site is so fundamental to the national identity that Angkor Wat is one of the few national structures to be depicted directly on the country's flag, and the only one not in an emblem or coat of arms. Yet much about this period remains uncertain. While evidence suggests that Angkor Wat was built as a temple to Vishnu and a royal mausoleum, we still do not know exactly when construction began or the full purpose of its design. Some features, such as inscriptions that run counterclockwise instead of the typical clockwise orientation, hint at complex religious or funerary intentions, but scholars continue to debate their significance. Even the lives and achievements of kings like Suryavarman II and Jayavarman VII come filtered through biased sources. Royal inscriptions that glorify their deeds, and external accounts by enemies or neighbors that may exaggerate their failures. Angkor's true scale has long been obscured by the flow of history. Following the decline and the subsequent overgrowth by the jungle, the vast capital was largely forgotten by the outside world, save those who continued to pilgrimage to its great temple, Angkor Wat. Its memory persisted locally, reinforced by legends such as the 16th century tale of King Angchan's quote unquote rediscovery, which was recorded by the Portuguese friar Antonio da Madalena. Nevertheless, it was not till centuries later that its full existence was widely reintroduced to the Western world by the French naturalist Henri Mouhot in the 1860s. But even more recently, centuries of political upheaval, colonization, and the Khmer Rouge genocide made excavation and study difficult. The site was even used as a fort during more recent conflicts, further obscuring the city's ancient layout. It wasn't until 2007, with the advent of LiDAR technology, that archaeologists have been able to map the vast extent of its urban landscape, revealing the immense scale of its temples, roads, and hydraulic systems. Today, Angkor is both a UNESCO World Heritage Site and a major tourist destination, celebrated for what many consider the most remarkable temple complex in Southeast Asia. This tourism is a crucial part of Cambodia's modern economy, accounting for nearly 10% of the country's GDP, with the vast majority of visitors drawn by the Angkor Archaeological Park. The complex is a window into the immense power, sophistication, and influence the Khmer people wielded in their time, a legacy that continues to shape both scholarship and the modern Cambodian identity. I hope you enjoyed this video and found this period in history both informative and enlightening. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and I hope you can join us for another video. Thanks for watching.